Really great to see you here for our webinar on managing your energy, avoiding burnout, or recovering from it. Burnout, I just want to give a bit of a definition of it, is a physical state of emotional exhaustion. It's real. People often talk about it as if it's sort of a made up situation, a made up experience, but it is real and it's very prevalent in today's fast-paced society. Many of us find ourselves feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, maybe lacking motivation due to the demands of work and life. And according to the American Psychological Association's 2021 Work and Wellbeing Survey, 3 in 5 workers reported experiencing negative mental and physical impacts due to work-related stress. 26% noticed a lack of interest, motivation, or energy. And 32% reported emotional exhaustion, and 44% noted high levels of physical fatigue. It's probably not a surprise to you. You've probably seen it in your homes, in yourself, in your colleagues. It does seem to be so prevalent right now. But we can do something about it. There are strategies to make it better, and there are strategies to prevent burnout. And one powerful resource is this webinar that we're going to take you through today. So in today's webinar, experienced executive coaches, Jane, Carol, and Marie, who you see here on the screen, they're going to discuss managing your energy. They're going to share experience from their clients, from their personal experience, from their learning and their research about what works and how you can manage your energy effectively. Without ado, I'll get first to the first question. What are the signs and symptoms of burnout that you've experienced or seen in your clients? And I'll start with you, Marie.
So with my clients, usually it's workload. They're just kind of like snowed under, if you like, and they feel like they're trapped. They feel like there's no way out. They feel like they're alone. Irritable, they can be irritable with their colleagues. They could be irritable with their direct reports as well. And there's also an underlying kind of sense of, everything, they're losing focus and control, if you like, with things around them. So their sleep starts to go, there's disturbance with their sleep. So regular sleep is very difficult to sleep regularly. It's very difficult when they are, having good sleep. They can't sleep because they're worried. There's a sense of, worry that's going on for them. Also eating habits are tending to go for fast food and things that don't nourish you. So you're not getting the nourishment that you need. Therefore, you're not productive as you can be in the day. And of course, exercise. And exercise doesn't mean going to the gym. It could be walking for 30 minutes to the office or back from the office or whatever that might be. But just thinking there's a kind of no hope kind of thing, sense around that. And exhaustion, just really exhausted all the time, fatigue all the time.
Thank you so much. And I remember reading somewhere that actually the lack of sleep is, when you have a lack of sleep, it's like being intoxicated. You may as well have been drinking alcohol. You might slow down, you make more mistakes, etc. Everything's a bit harder. So the sleep piece is, I think, a really important one, that you're exhausted, but then you can't sleep, so you become more exhausted. And it's a form of torture, actually, isn't it, really, lack of sleep? Jane, what are your thoughts on this? What have you seen, or what do you know about the signs and symptoms with you or your clients in terms of burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the significant signs of burnout is this feeling of depersonalization or detachment. And it's, that being disconnected from work and people. And you kind of go in on yourself and you find yourself increasingly wanting to isolate yourself. You stop those interactions with your manager, your colleagues and your clients. And, it can have a knock-on effect with your relationships out of work as well. You might not even want to engage or interact with your loved ones and your family and your friends. So if you're starting to notice this isolating behavior, and of course, that then gives you feelings of loneliness. And, there's a huge amount of research about that, loneliness and social isolation. It has such an impact, doesn't it, on our physical and mental health. So that depersonalization is something to look for. It also can lead you to feeling quite cynical, and you start to even show a lack of empathy to colleagues or clients, and you know that's not what you're typically like. Other signs of burnout, just even difficulty making simple decisions. I mean, on average, an average person takes about 35,000 decisions a day, which is a huge amount of things to think about. And that takes energy. So when your brain is struggling with sort of mental strain, decision making becomes overwhelming, and you can find yourself making impulsive decisions as you don't have the energy to think things through. And I think the other thing that I see with burnout is it starts to affect your motivation, and you start procrastinating, or you start really struggling to get started on tasks. And also this thing about emotional dysregulation, which is also a sign of burnout. And what that means is when you have emotional dysregulation, you're struggling to control or regulate your emotional responses, and that obviously then has a real difficulty on managing your moods. So I think the thing with burnout is that a lot of people don't realize that they're going through it, until it gets really bad, and that's when it's usually creeping up slowly. So I think if you can recognize signs early, that is just so important to do.
The 27% of people who completed the poll, they're doing exactly the right thing. As you're all speaking, I'm thinking of this word, MEH, it's that feeling, isn't it, really? I think that's what burnout is. You have that, I don't know if I don't know if I've got the energy. I don't know if I can be motivated. It's all too much. It's all overwhelming. I think, if you hear yourself or feel yourself like that sort of sense, then that could be a sign for you. Carol, what would you add to what's been said, or how can you build on?
In addition to what Jane and Marie have said about the sort of emotional and physical exhaustion and the anxiety and being sensitive to criticism, you may find that you're crying a lot more over the slightest little thing. But other things that can happen is that it can weaken your immune system, because when your body is in a continued stress response, because that's what it is, your body goes into the stress response, and that can then weaken your immune system, and you are in that way, and you may find that you're more susceptible to colds and other sorts of illnesses. Another thing is adopting addictive behaviors as a way of escaping from the issue. So that might be increasing your alcohol consumption, or overeating, or excess shopping, or something. And I'll give you an example how it crept upon someone and she didn't realize. She was a HR director, and she knew all about stress management because she'd done her thesis on stress management, but she didn't realize that it was happening to her. She was the kind of person who didn't say no. She was working excessive hours, working long hours. And one of the things that she said that she noticed was that in the evenings, what started off as a glass of wine gradually turned into half a bottle of gin. And it got to the extent where she wasn't even realizing that she was drinking so much alcohol. She was eating, as I think it was Marie who mentioned, a lot of junk food because she didn't have time to cook, that sort of thing. And then it all sort of accumulated one day where she collapsed at work, and that was the turning point for her, because she had burnt out completely.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that story. Yeah, you're not the first one, and she's not the first one who, in terms of that experience. And I think in terms of my clients, I can think of times where people have been also quite frantic. Sometimes you just hear them, I can't, I've got too much to do, I cannot stop, and you just know that they're burning themselves out because they can't think straight anymore as well. So thank you for sharing those examples. I'm hoping that those who are listening are thinking, some of that sounds like me, or like someone I would like to help and support. I'm starting to recognize the signs and become aware of them. So we know what the challenge is, we know what it looks like, but what can people do to avoid getting to the stage of burnout in the first place, getting to this stage? I'm going to start with you, Jane. What can people do to avoid getting to this state of burnout?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think, first of all, it's really important to address the underlying issues which are causing burnout in the first place. So there was a survey done by Garrett, and they listed 5 top reasons for burnout, which was unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, lack of role clarity, lack of communication support from their manager, and unreasonable time pressure. So I think if you take some time out to work out what is causing your stress levels to rise at work, and then look at what support or solutions you might need as early as possible. That often, I think, starts with working out what's within your control to change and what's not. You know, can you set yourself better boundaries? What can you say no to? And I think it's also really important as early as possible to talk to your manager or a trusted colleague about what's causing your stress at work. And, you know, before obviously it becomes, you know, that you're chronically affected by it. And I think if your mental health is impacted at your work, that it's not a sign of weakness. I think people tend to think of it as a sign of weakness, actually talking about it. But it's really important to talk about how we're feeling and how work is affecting you. And obviously, if you can't talk to your manager, then you might have to sort of escalate it and talk to maybe, you know, bring it up with HR or a union if you're in a union, or another leader. And I think another thing which is so important when you're trying to avoid burnout is to build up your resilience. And a key way to build up your resilience is to manage your stress response, you know, which is something Carol mentioned before. And because if you are living with constant stressors, you know, your body is constantly, you know, feeling like it's under attack. And you'll, you know, get stressful hormones like cortisol, which are way too high, and has been said, you know, that really lowers your body's immunity level. So some of the key things you can do to discharge that stress response and really activate your own body's calming mechanism is, as was mentioned before, you know, physical activity. It's so important to kind of get moving, you know, whether that is, you know, that 15-minute brisk walk. Even like for me, you know, dancing around my kitchen to my favorite tunes is a way to just dissipate some of that cortisol, you know, and use it up. I would always recommend looking at breathing strategies as well. Anything which gives you a longer out breath than your in breath is useful to do. And I can perhaps talk about technique about that later. And also because you're holding lots of tension in your body when you're constantly experiencing stresses during the day, look for relaxation techniques that really work to reduce some of that stored tension. Muscular relaxation is a really good one to use, to just kind of work through the different muscle groups and just really let go, as I said, of all of that pent up stress hormones, which haven't, you know, through fight and flight, just have to be dissipated. And a final one I'm going to talk about is laughter, the importance of laughter to discharge your stress hormones. Because when you laugh, when you have a proper belly laugh, again, that activates the body's kind of calming system. So whether you watch your favorite comedian on YouTube or just connect with a good friend that you can laugh with easily. So all the time, what you're doing is you're managing your stress response before it builds up over a long period of time. And I think those sort of things, anything that calms you down, will help you avoid getting to the burnout phase.
Fabulous. I definitely think laughter is really great medicine, and there is actually laughter therapy, isn't there, in that people come into organizations and get everyone laughing, and just it's a good way of letting everything out. I think it's really cathartic. So thanks for mentioning the laughter. Carol, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Jane shared some great advice there. And self-awareness is key, I'd say, in terms of being able to recognize the increases in your stress level. So make regular time for self-reflection and just check in with how you're feeling, how you're reacting, how you're responding, so that you can monitor your stress levels, and putting boundaries in place. When people are under a lot of pressure, often the boundaries go, and then people are imposing on them and they're not saying no. So putting those boundaries in place and then sticking to those boundaries. Not working excessive hours. Oftentimes you may feel because your workload is heavy that you've got to work excessive hours, but that is actually counterproductive. And research shows that people who work 70 hours a week are no more productive than those who work 55 hours a week. The more hours you work, the less productive you become because of the effect on your cognition and the impairment it does to your cognition. And manage your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual energy, and keeping yourself topped up in all those 4 areas. And so that's things like making sure that you're aware, you are not sort of overloading yourself mentally, that you're keeping yourself sufficiently mentally challenged, that you are looking at how you manage your emotions, you're managing those well. Physical exercises, Jane talked about and Marie mentioned earlier, making sure that you are getting sufficient rest and keeping yourself physically well. Spiritual energy, if you have a faith or a particular religion, practicing that. If you're somebody who doesn't have a faith, just being in nature or doing those things that allow you to get into a state of flow where you can be creative, whether it's walking in nature, whether it's listening to music, but doing something that allows you to get into that creative mode. And keeping yourself energized in those 4 areas will help you to be at your optimal and help you to manage your stress as well. And if you're introverted, I would say be very mindful of the practices that don't allow you to be at your best self. So things like meetings or open plan offices where there's a lot of external activity going on, because that can be overstimulating. And when you're in environments which are overstimulating, that can make you feel drained of energy, which can add to the stress that you're under. So finding ways to recharge during the day, making sure you take a lunch break and going out for a walk during your lunch break. As Jane has talked about, the breathing exercises, they're really good for just helping you to calm down as well. And that old saying, work, rest and play.
You're breaking up a bit there.
Is so true. So make sure so that you're resting and that you're playing and having fun as well.
Brilliant, thank you. You did break up a couple of times. Just to say, I think someone was asking, it was mental, emotional, physical and spiritual energy, wasn't it, Carol?
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Thank you so much, Carol. Wonderful. And Marie, what would you add in terms of, you know, this idea of how can we avoid getting to this state of burnout in the first place? I particularly like this idea of nature. For me, going out, getting some fresh air, you know, hugging a tree, listening to the sound of water. These are the things that really help me. But yeah, what would you add?
Yeah, so really great points from both Jane and Carol, and there are areas that I'll kind of just elaborate on because they've been very comprehensive in what they've actually said. So if we go to that point about going out in nature, when I feel really stressed and when clients feel really stressed, I ask them what they do in terms of mindfulness. So that's actually being fully present in the moment, and that's actually accepting things without judgment. So you could go on to a mindful walk if you like, so you're actually appreciating everything around you. You're even maybe paying a lot of attention to the steps that you're taking as well, and looking at seeing colors more vivid, seeing shapes, you know, in more clarity and things like that. It's actually about shifting the focus, shifting the energy from something that's really something that's actually depleting you into something that's actually nourishing you. Both Carol and Jane talked about that, talked about how you can step away from situations where you can take maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes out. And I know when you're really feel under, you know, a weight on you, it's very difficult to think about, I can't leave this. You get so connected, but it's actually thinking that, yes, to do that, I can re-energize myself and then come back with more clarity to actually complete a task better. And this whole thing about managing your tasks, there's a technique called the Pomodoro technique, where you really focus on tasks and manage them in 25-minute sections. So you might say, for 25 minutes, I'm going to focus on this task, and for 5 minutes, I'm going to have a break. And that can really help you to work through your tasks more effectively throughout the day. And sometimes you may go to 30 minutes or 35 minutes. That's okay. Remember the whole thing about no judgment. Don't judge yourself. Really think about being kind to yourself in that situation, because what we tend to do when we have burnout is we beat ourselves up as well on top of having burnout, which is a very which is a very difficult space to be, because you're overloading yourself with a lot more stress, if you like. So that's something that I would think about. Boundaries are essential. This whole thing about saying no, learn to say no. If you've already got an intensive workload, why are you accepting more? Learn to say no, it's very important. And talk to maybe your manager around that, or your supervisor, or somebody that you can trust, that to say to them, look, I can manage this just about right now, but I can't take any more on. And also this delegation. If there's anyone, a colleague, a friend, that you can delegate to in the work scenario, a colleague that you can delegate, or who can be supportive anyway, you're not alone. You don't need to be alone. So I suggest you ask for support as well.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to jump to a different, not the question that I planned to, but the one, a question around advice you'd give someone currently experiencing burnout, and maybe some really practical, something really practical that they can do. And then we'll go to the questions, because we have got at least 3 questions that have come through that I want to make sure we have enough time to answer. So what advice would you give someone currently experiencing burnout? I'm going to start with you, Carol.
So first of all, I would say, well done for coming on this webinar, because that is a step in the right direction. Get professional support. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay, you know, you're in this situation that you are. It's okay to ask for help. Get professional support. If your workplace has a well-being support service, tap into that, because you'll be able to get support through there. If not, reach out to one of us, and we'll be able to point you in the right direction. Prioritize self-care. It's so important that you look after yourself, and then you allow yourself the space and time just to rest and to rejuvenate and to recover. And you know, and that may take time. It may happen quickly, it may take time, and that is okay, but allowing yourself to have that, and doing something each day that brings you joy. Because when you are in a state of burnout, and you may feel that there's no hope, you may just feel that you're just so stuck, but just doing little things. It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be something as little as going for a walk in the park and just taking in the beauty of the nature, or smelling the flowers, or something like that, but something that gives you joy. It's been touched on earlier, but mindfulness is a great way of just allowing your mind. What happens is your mind is working overtime, overthinking, worrying about worst possible scenarios, but just allowing your mind just to come back into the present, and practicing mindfulness meditation, that can really help as well. Another thing is journaling and just writing down how you're feeling, and exploring your thoughts and working through them, because oftentimes we don't stop and think about what we're thinking about, and we have hundreds and thousands of thoughts a day. And sometimes it's like we're on a treadmill, and we just allow these thoughts to take over our minds, take over our lives. But just allowing yourself that time to pause, just writing down, reflecting, increasing your awareness about what is going on for you, and allowing yourself just to move through that through your writing can help a lot.
Absolutely. And I think with the journaling, it's catching the moment. So, you know, you don't have to have half an hour of journaling time if you've got very busy life. It can be, you know, a few minutes when you wake up, a few minutes before you go to bed. Oh, you're on a train, do a few minutes between stops. So it's something that you can quite easily fit into your life. Thank you so much. So many great points, Carol. I'll go to Marie next.
So yes, thank you, Carol. Really great points you've made. I think the whole thing around the journaling, the whole thing around, you know, there's lots going on in your head, and how it's about quieting your mind, and what techniques you can actually use to do that. So I would go back to this shifting focus, and in the kind of PQ space, which is positive intelligence space, and that's about looking at the positive side of the brain, what you can achieve, rather than the negative, what the judgment side. So what you can do to focus, there are some techniques that you can actually use. That might be about body scanning. I know that we mentioned that earlier. There might be about kind of tensing and relaxing as well, so that you can actually release. You can tense up and then you can actually release to calm yourself down as well. And this whole thing about developing new behaviors and baby steps, and you'll have to have baby steps to actually get there, but to persevere in doing that. So if you're creating a new behavior, as we mentioned before, say breathing techniques, start, you know, slowly, start with a minute, start with 30 seconds, start really slow, and then, you know, progress on to a minute to 2 minutes, etc. And just keep going, because those techniques will help you to calm your body and de-stress. I personally find that this whole thing about journaling, and literally when I tell you it's 5 minutes, not even that, it's literally that, bullet points about what is going on in my head. It's a brain dump for me, and I need that, or it's all still going on in my head and it's more pressure that I'm imposing on myself. So I need to get rid of it some way, in some shape or form, and that's shifting that. Also, I can't say enough, you know, about exercise. Really always try and do something, even if it is up and down the stairs for a couple of minutes in between breaks or something like that. And also taking yourself away from something. If you've got a document and you're poring over it, I always find if I go and wash a cup, an idea will come to me and a resolution will come to me, and then I'm back with a different energy and working through that task.
Fantastic, thank you. Lastly, Jane.
Well, my main key message is, in a nutshell, don't suffer in silence. I think that is absolutely key if you are experiencing burnout. And I would advise, you know, following on what Karen was saying about professional support, I would advise you do book time with your GP, discuss your mental and physical symptoms, you know, talk about, you know, treatment options, and they can sign you off work. And that could be just what you need as well. So I think that's really important to do. In terms of some practical tips, you know, if I go back to the discharging the stress response and breathing techniques, where your out breath is longer than your in breath, one of the techniques that I often use with clients, which reduces the body's natural stress response, is 3-4-5 breathing. So that means you breathe in for the count of 3, you hold your breath for the count of 4, and then you breathe out for the count of 5. And you can do a few rounds of that as you feel yourself getting stressed. And you can extend that, you know, to 5 minutes as well. And another key point, I mean, it has been said before, but it's just to reiterate it, the importance of social interaction. Yeah, we're hardwired to seek those connections, and it gives us a message that we're safe, because, you know, our ancient stress response is all about not feeling safe. So look for those interactions, you know, make time to talk to your loved ones, check in with your friends and colleagues, have those socials, put them into the diary. As difficult it might feel when you want to sort of isolate yourself, it's almost, you've got to, it's counter to that, you've got to push yourself to make, you know, the time to see your friends and have those interactions. Even sometimes just saying hi to somebody who's making you coffee at in the coffee shop as well. Just we need those interactions, and they calm us right down as well. So I would say that those are some of the key things I would think about if you are going through burnout at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. So I want to go to our first question. And the person says, as a woman of colour trying to progress upwards, there is a fear that if you complain about the excess workload, you are seen as not fit for progression. This makes it harder to voice when you are struggling. Just any reflections or thoughts on that experience that this person is having?
Well, I think, well, I'm sorry to hear that this is a situation that you're going through, firstly. And certainly, being a woman of colour, I can resonate with what you're talking about. But you also need to think about your health. And is there anyone that you can think of that you can trust and that you can communicate and you can talk to about this? So that it may be a manager or it may be somebody in HR, because this it's a cycle. It becomes a cycle. And if you're seen to be, you know, doing the workload and you're getting more and you keep on saying yes and yes, it's not going to be good for your health, I think, at the end of the day. And then burnout is the next stage. And that's what you're trying to avoid. So my advice would probably be to try and find somebody that you can talk to about this, maybe even colleagues. Maybe there's a way you can delegate some sections of the work that you've got so that you can just ease something for yourself. And this whole thing about breaks, making sure that you have breaks, because when we have an intense workload, we just want to sit there and pour over it. But if you can manage to have some breaks and just give yourself a bit of, we were talking about calm yourself down a bit, and, you know, boundaries around your time when you work. Yes, you may have to work a bit later, but that should maybe only be for that period of time. And then you need a break. Then you need to step away from that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yes, I would add to, so you mentioned about that fear, and I would say it's looking at what it is, what is underpinning that fear, because we're very much led by our emotions, many of us, and the way that we think affects how we feel, and we act and behave according to how we're feeling. And if we're fearful or worrying about something, that's going to affect how we act and behave. And when we're anxious and fearful, we don't necessarily think clearly or rationally or helpfully. So I would sort of look at, well, what are your thoughts and beliefs about the situation, and just challenge what you think and what you believe, and rationalize it, and look at what is a more helpful perspective to take. So it, you know, you're thinking that because you're a woman of color, that if you talk about excess workload and how the impact it's having on you, that it's going to result in a negative outcome in terms of your progression. But have you really stopped and asked yourself, and is that real? What is the evidence to support what you're thinking? So by challenging yourself and your thinking and looking at what is a much more helpful perspective to take, because if you change how you think, you change how you feel. If you change how you feel, you change how you act and behave. And also ask yourself, well, what is the worst possible outcome? If you were to raise about your complaint, you know, your workload, and talk about your workload, what is the worst possible outcome? And if that was to happen, what could you do? And ask yourself those questions. What can I do if I raise this and then I get sort of talked down? And as Marie said, it's about looking after your health. Your health is your priority.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with the points, because if you're unwell, your career is going to be stagnated anyway. So the thing that you're trying to avoid, your career, issues with your career might happen anyway because of what you're doing, or you might not be taken so seriously because you're putting all those hours in. You're not doing any self-promotion. You're not working at strategic level because you're doing. So some of the things that you think might get in the way of your career might, it might be the other way around. Some of the things that you're doing might be hindering your career as well. So there's another perspective on it. And as everyone said, try and seek some other perspectives and some different ways of doing things. But completely understand that sort of extra burden and extra feeling of scrutiny that you might be experiencing as a woman of color in the workplace. So we have a question here. It seems quite specific. How can we differentiate between burnout and compassion fatigue in ourselves, which is a case for some professions, particularly caring professions? I say social workers and people like that, I imagine. And which strategies might work for both? Any insight into this question?
I'll go. So it's recognizing that, I mean, compassion fatigue, that is a form of burnout, and it's about how you manage the things that we've sort of talked about can apply there, and how if you're in a sort of a role where there is a lot of caring responsibilities, like a social worker or so forth, tapping into the supervision that you get if you're in a role that in that sort of a role, tapping into that supervision, making the most of it. If it's a role that doesn't involve supervision, it's about how you can manage how you're responding to the the caring responsibilities that you have, the work that you're doing. It's about how you can manage how you respond to, if you're dealing with sort of cases or people where they've got a lot of issues, social issues, personal issues, and you're sort of feeling very sort of burnt out with compassion fatigue. Look, is getting support, putting into practice the things that we've said, and recognizing that it's a role that you're doing and you are helping other people. And sometimes it's about finding ways that you can not detach yourself from the role, but that you can sort of compartmentalize the role that you're doing, and recognizing that yes, people will come with lots of issues and challenges, and you're doing your best to help them, but you can't take on too much of that burden for yourself.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think I don't know if anyone wants to add to that. Shall I move to the next question? Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that answer. So firstly, this person says, firstly, I want to express my gratitude for this timely webinar. It couldn't have come at a better moment. I have recently been appointed as a business lead for a firm-wide project, which I consider a significant career milestone. Well done, especially considering the setbacks faced during the pandemic. However, I've noticed that I've already started working longer hours, even on weekends. This tendency may be second nature, given my previous experience in the sector. I'm eager to learn practical strategies to maintain a healthy work-life balance. So if you could give us a short, quick tip for this person to help them not work weekends and not work all the hours. Who wants to go first? Marie?
Yeah, so we've talked about quite a few techniques and things that you could actually use. Really, firstly, it might be about stepping back and have a look at your workload in general. For me, weekends are out. At times when there's an intense program or something going on, I may work until lunchtime on the Saturday, but thereafter it's about family time, friend time, social time. It's very important. We want you to excel and succeed in this role. So as we were talking about health before, you need to come with your best self and your healthy self. And that won't be you working through the weekend, because you'll be tired, and that will just culminate into more tiredness, and that's not a journey that we'd like you to go on. So really have a look, step back and look at this workload, look at the days and how you actually manage your time through those days. And if there are opportunities, look for opportunities where you can delegate where possible. Look for opportunities where there may be somebody that's in your team who can take on some responsibilities, because you want to nurture them and grow them and support them as well. Look for those opportunities with your peers as well. There may be projects that you're working on that you can collaborate with. So there may be something that they can take on board from you, from your workload. So I would really stand back and I would take a look at what's in front of you, and try and see where you can actually, delegate, where you can collaborate, or where you can partner with other people in terms of your work. And that whole thing about finding somebody to talk to in the organization, finding somebody who maybe a form of a mentor, if you have somebody that can mentor you, or there's somebody that you can feel that you can talk to, who you can trust and you can talk to. Maybe there's some tips from people actually within the organization, or somebody who's been in that position before, that can actually help you as well.
Thank you. We've got quite a few more questions, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, if that's okay. What do you do if you've spoken to your manager and said you're just coping, and they said, yes, I hear you, but the solution is not to be giving opportunities to be involved in other projects due to your workload? So you've told them that you're not managing, but then you get excluded from the more stretching, exciting projects, and that ends up limiting your development. So you can be stuck with high workload and not being able to develop because you're not getting those new opportunities or the creativity. Or they say, yes, you can have support from ex-colleague, but then email the team to say that person is only going to be supporting someone else. So you find out you're not really going to get the support that they've promised. So the first is they hear you, but then they exclude you from the sexy projects, or they ask us to get some support, but the support doesn't actually come your way. Any thoughts on this, Jane?
Yeah, I guess there's no sort of easy kind of solution to this, but it starts with having a conversation with your manager about what you feel is happening. I think sort of having that open sort of dialogue and raising, you know, how you're feeling as well. So I think that's really important, that you actually do have a conversation with your manager to say that you feel like this is what's happening and that you are feeling like you are being sort of overlooked as well. So I think it starts with, you know, those brave but sort of challenging conversations with your manager about what you need and, you know, what you'd like to do in order to progress.
Thank you. Anything else to add to that one?
Yeah, I would add as well is that looking at what is within your remit of control, and what you can change, which is within your remit of control. Maybe looking at your workload. Are there things that you're doing that you could do differently or don't need to be doing? Sometimes you've done things the way they've done because it's always the way they've always been done, but maybe sort of reevaluating and reassessing your workload and how things are done, and seeing if there are different ways of doing things that can help to ease the workload. And as Jane has said, going to your manager, and in addition to that, also going to your manager with the solutions that you need and letting them know, well, this is what will help. Looking for any particular things that they may say, well, no, but you know, finding solutions that can help you, and letting them know that you don't want that to stop your development because you have got a heavy workload.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have a question here. For junior employees, how do you navigate a toxic work environment that involves micromanagement and comparison from line managers that has led to burnout? How do you open a discussion to manage your own workload when your manager is taking over your outlook? I'm not sure if that means actually taking over your Microsoft Outlook, or just how has taken over how you see the world. I'm not quite sure, but I'll repeat that. For junior employees, how do you navigate a toxic work environment that involves micromanagement and comparison from line management that has led to burnout? How do you open a discussion to manage your own workload when your manager is taking over your Outlook?
I can go with that if you want. So oftentimes when you have a line manager that is micromanaging and is displaying the behaviors that describe, there's a lot to do with their insecurities and the pressures that they're under as well. So I would say is maybe trying to understand what is going on for your manager may be a good thing to do, because once you understand what is going on for them, it's then easier to then have the conversation with them about it, because you'll have that understanding of where they're coming on, or the pressures that they're under, why they are behaving the way that they do. So why are they micromanaging? What are the pressures that they're going through, and why are they displaying those kind of behaviors? And then having the conversation with your line manager about how things are. If you are able to, if you feel that you can have that conversation with them, that letting them know that oftentimes when line managers are micromanaging, it's because, one, they don't trust that people will do what is required, or because they maybe have sort of perfectionist tendencies. But just giving your manager that assurance that yes, you can do what is required and what is expected, and letting them know that you want that bit of autonomy rather than them sort of constantly managing you. Having that conversation and doing it from a place of empathy, where you've sort of considered what it is, why they're behaving the way that they are.
Yeah, I think it's always good if you can be, and sometimes to be indirect, to talk to someone else who will influence your line manager, because it can be, if you're in a junior position, really quite intimidating to say something to your manager. But speaking to maybe you've got a mentor internally, maybe a buddy, and just saying, oh, this is happening, is this usual? I'm finding this challenging, any tips for me on how I could do things differently? And then you're letting other people know there's a problem without actually maybe you might not have to be the person who directly challenges it. I'd also say, really frankly, that some environments I've worked in just haven't been for me. and sometimes you're gonna, what do they say, a weed growing a flower growing in the wrong place is a weed, and then you go somewhere else and you blossom as a beautiful flower. So there's something also about the culture that sometimes in organizations isn't right for you, or the line manager that's not right for you, and the longer you're in your career, the more you'll choose organizations, not just let them choose you as well. So I think this is all part of the learning process and development process too. Thank you. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.